It's nice to see you all again. We're about to start our first session today. And today we have the pleasure of company of the most outstanding guests. Certainly my best recommendations to his films. And there are very famous movies, life as something transmitted by sexual intercourse. I can easily recommend a couple of dozens of his films out of 70 that he filmed, but I wouldn't, and I would turn the floor to introduce the experts. First, Ina Berezkina will make her introduction, and then Marina Kvitkovskaya will do the same on her part. And I hope that those introductions will be brief enough so that our speaker would have enough time. Just in the presence of all the present, I would like to thank Krzysztof on behalf of Lena and the school. I would like to thank Krzysztof, who came to Moscow for a very short stay. He came after midnight yesterday, and he will stay only one day with us, and I think it's an outstanding gift for us. I was only going to say that for us it's a great honor and great luck to have him here tonight, this morning. Because his films and documentaries Krzysztof shot lie in the same area which is the focus of attention of our school. I understand that Krzysztof was educated as a physicist, but I think his love to the mankind made him a very good film director. But I think he will personally tell his story to us. The problems that he identifies in his films are eternal problems. Those are the philosophical questions of evil and virtue, and what is sin, what is conscience, and I think even one session is not enough to make an introduction of Krzysztof, but we will not take his precious time, and I would like to turn the floor to Martina. Very briefly, who is going to tell us again very briefly. And I would like to tell you that each time we have a workshop, we have a number of participants from Poland, and we have very tender relations with Poland. We have joint projects, and it's really very nice. Martina, the floor is yours, please. Good morning. I'm speaking not only on my behalf, I'm speaking on behalf of the Polish delegation, and today at breakfast some of the Polish members had a chance to speak to Krzysztof, and when we sat together we came to just one very short idea that we were all brought up with the films that were made by the gentleman who sits next to me, and I hope that you will have an opportunity to see those films, and hopefully both the school and Krzysztof will have another chance to meet, so when we see his films, you will be better prepared to ask him questions about his work. And on my part, I would like to add to this very remarkable session and introductions. On August 1st, on Friday, there will be an anniversary of a Polish rebellion. 70 years ago, there was a rebellion in Poland, and we should not forget about that. I think Poland was the only country in Europe where people paid such a dear price to rebel against Nazis. So in Poland, it's really an anniversary that is going to be marked quite broadly, and I think it's also a very important event for us. So I'd like to thank Krzysztof for not only teaching us with his films, but for the fact that he found some time to come to us and speak before us during his very short stay in Moscow. And he promised that if we survive and work in the next year, he will also come to us to speak. Thank you very much for that invitation, for the very kind words. And I'm wearing a tie even now because tonight I'm going to be present at that celebration in Warsaw with the presence of the President and those war veterans who are still alive. In my family, there are two ladies, nurses, who 7 years ago saved the wounded during that rebellion. And I hope that my flight will not be delayed and I will come to that celebration on time. So I decided to come to you and have some conversation. I thought that it would be an academic lecture because I had no idea about your format, your students. So, but with your permission, I would like to brief you on my ideas. It's not something arrogant, but I have a number of quotations, so it's easy for me. It will be easy for me to speak in English. But in the second part of my presentation, I'll switch into Russian.
I will switch into English only for the first part of this session, because I've chosen a subject matter about common good. And common good is very widely discussed in Anglo-Saxon countries, but I think we need this notion because if we want to evaluate what happens in public life, if we want to evaluate politicians and say, is this politician good or bad, we have to make reference to public good. Because whoever acts in favor of public good should be applauded. Whosever action is not working to increase public good is somebody who should be condemned. What is public good has many definitions, and I've chosen Francis Hutcheson, who says, the greatest good for greatest number. What sounds quite nice, but has no reference to the other side, to the distribution of good and of bad. John Stuart Mills has another definition. Greatest happiness, as a principle, takes happiness and happiness as sums it over a social unit, complicated phrase, but it says that happiness is distributed largely, is a sign of public good. There is also in Catholic Church a very important statement from 1878 from the Pope Leo XIII, who wrote Encyclica Rerum Novarum, and he also defined public good. Conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily is if some heads have to, well, that's easy and that's the point. And then you may see that this definition of Leo XIII is uncomfortable to both sides of political scene. Because the left side usually believes that if some heads have to roll to improve humanity's lot, so be it. A commitment to common good opposes that entirely. So either or. Each and every person has dignity, and that's what is the Christian belief. The good society is one which allows the thriving for all persons, especially the weak and vulnerable. At the same time, concept of common good challenges the libertarian stream of conservatism as well. Individualists only want to see each individual life as they please, as individual lives as he pleases or as they please, as well as they don't obstruct the ability of other individuals to do the same. They don't think anything is common except whatever minimal infrastructure is needed to create equal opportunity. You know, common good is very vague and fine-sounding phrases. So it tends to be very fine-sounding and easily becomes a political parabolum to promote whatever policies the speaker wants to advance. And I will give you an example, which is a quote of somebody who maybe will become a future president of the United States, Miss Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton in 2004, addressing a group of donors, said, "We're going to take things away from you on behalf of common good." To some ears, the common good echoes the communist demand that all lesser goods yield to the construction of the people's paradise. Let me quote you now something that we Poles are very proud of. At the year 2000, we gathered in Gdansk, the city where the World War II started, and the city where communism ended. And among us, there was a very distinguished Russian public activist, Mr. Kovalyov, and a couple of other foreigners, and we voted a charter of human duties and responsibilities, because we have already a charter of human rights. Chapter on responsibilities says about common good. Everybody should aspire to provide as many people as possible with the widest field of individual freedom and responsibilities. Well, I have these quotes, and now I have to ask myself, what is good for humanity today? The economists have always read the answer: growth. If economy grows, people are happy, and society is balanced. But look how short is the notion, how new is the notion of growth. There were many civilizations in the past: the Egyptian, Babylonian, Indian, Chinese, Maya, and they were all very stable. They were not really growing. 4,000 years, Egypt was more or less the same. It is only last 800 or 700 years that Europe moved people towards the growth, and this growth is beneficiary to all of us because we have all these incredible inventions like electric current, energy, and so on. Energy consumption, by the way, is one of the indexes of freedom. And as an ex-physicist myself, I like to point it out because politicians and sociologists are not so keen to talk about calories. Number of calories we have in our individual disposal is an index of our freedom. It means we're not hungry, we're not freezing, and we can move easily from one place to another. The amount of energy that each of us consumes daily is much bigger than the amount of energy that Roman emperor was having in his disposal. So we are lucky. We are better off than Roman emperor. Well, but we know that this is not a very objective and not the only index of freedom we should take into consideration. We're living in a world when consumption is growing with incredible acceleration. I can remember 25 years ago I've turned 50, now I'm 75. And some of my colleagues made an account and they just told me, according to the statistics, how many tons of kerosene were burned because of my travels. It was at that time about 4 liters per 100 kilometers. Now it's a little bit less. And it was also put into account how many cows have been slaughtered to give me veal, because I like beefsteak. I feel guilty up to now, but I still travel and I still eat meat. But I think it is a little bit problematic. Well, if we talk about equal rights, which gives us a comfort that we're living in democratic society, we have to take into consideration something that my Chinese students brought me as a very attractive evidence. They said, if we have equal rights, we Chinese and we Indians, altogether almost 3 billion people, we have right to sit at the beach in summer. If you count amount of people and amount of beaches, they must be in 3 layers, because in 1 layer there is not enough place and they're all from northern hemisphere. So we are a little bit in trouble, which have to choose between to have and to be, but we usually choose to have, while this is a real dilemma of humanity, how to be, because there is no chance that we all have. There are some goods that will not be multiplied ever. There is only one Mona Lisa. Now in summer, I live part in Paris, so in summer you wait 4 to 5 hours to see Mona Lisa. In 10 years you will wait a week when all Chinese and Indians will want to see Mona Lisa. In fact, there is in Louvre, I spoke to the manager of Louvre, there is another Mona Lisa which looks exactly the same. And there was a concept of show both of them, but they made an investigation and it was clear that people would like to see both, so they will queue twice. Well, we want to improve the quality of life, but we are now creating new elements. I have personal experience as an ex-physicist. This is my little privilege. I'm very much attached to physics, and this is one of the sayings I have coined, that my love to physics is still there, but physics never loved me. That's why I'm a filmmaker. But I was visiting, it was in Portland, Oregon, University, working with one of the Tokyo universities on the robots and robotics. I was so impressed when I've seen that robots are prepared to replace humans, especially the servants. And there is a robot servant for old people. In fact, the engineers, most of them Japanese, they asked me to make a test, to sit in front of the robot and try to talk to the robot. It was 3-4 years ago. And I was trying to make a sabotage, so I sat in front of this robot with 2 eyes, which were 2 cameras, and I was silent. I didn't want to start the conversation. After a moment, as programmed, the robot used its strange synthesized voice and said, "Why are you so sad?" So I said, "Idiot, I'm not sad." Then the robot answered, "Why do you call me idiot?" So it was well programmed. But I asked, "Why do you do this experiment?" They say, "Well, we want to test your accent. Is a robot tolerant for your accent?" But they were working on my field, could you believe me? That's why I quote it. They were working on analysis of human speech because all people who will be served by the robot will be telling the same stories again and again. Robot has to analyze it and interrupt and say, oh, you said it to me day before yesterday. Could you work out about what this detail? Then the credibility of robot will increase and the price as well. Well, I won't skip Karl Popper, whom I wanted to say, to quote, he was so contrary to the ideologies, but he didn't notice that when there are no ideologies and no religion, there is a big vacuum in social life, and societies tend to degenerate. It is a big problem in my view, because people surrounded by unknown, uncertain, insecure, are looking for many extreme choices which are very bad, or they fall to something what Daniel Bell called pop hedonism. And pop hedonism is one of the biggest dangers of our time. We have another side of the coin, which is, like carrot and stick. If we don't want carrot, there is a stick. We are endangered species. Humans may live on this planet or not. This planet existed without us and may exist without us. And we are not very close, but there is a perspective of the extinction of human beings. First, because of some calamity which is beyond our reach. Second, because of some calamity that may happen because of our activities, explosion, war. We changed conditions of our life, especially in the last 100 years. And the Darwin rules of natural selections do not apply to humans anymore. And we are in a very strange situation that we live in the world and we complain, and this world we created. It is our environment. It is not natural environment. If it was natural, we would have been sitting in the garden and there would be no microphone. There would be no listener and no speaker. My students, I have to confess, in Moscow, made a terrible joke in one of my master classes. They took Nogovo Ruskovo, I don't know how to translate it in Russian, who was already drunk and very rich. And they helped him to get even more drunk. So he lost his consciousness. And they arranged for him a cage in your zoological garden. They put him there, and they put a little label that was ready, Homo sapiens, and how much he eats, how long he lives, where is he living, and so on. They put a camera in front. They waited some time. He woke up and was rather astonished why on the left-hand side there is a chimpanzee and on the right-hand side there's orangutan. And so he had a very strange face and people were applauding. But I think it's a metaphor of something that may happen to us. Human being as such may become a extinguished species. Maybe Superman will be created very soon. Superman with some chips in his brain. So this is a danger. And as I am in the zoological garden, and I like zoological gardens even if I prefer natural safari, I've noticed that our days, in most zoological gardens, they don't feed carnivorous animals in a way which was traditional. Now, if there is a polar bear, which you know has this neurotic tendency to move from one side to another, they give the polar bear fish in the block of ice. And angry polar bear has to fight with ice, and after half an hour can eat the fish. And it's not neurotic anymore. Tiger is getting meat hanging on the tree and must jump many times and then catches meat. And it is healthy for the tiger in captivity. And what is healthy for humans? Would you find a politician or political party who will say, we will create obstacles for you so that you will not become obese? Because obesity now becomes a huge problem because we live in the civilization of no refusal. Everybody wants to consume. Very few people of old culture have this habit of saying no and saying, I limit myself. So this is a problem, but no politician will ever like to make such a revolution. So we come back to the definition of common good. The greatest good for the greatest number. But again, we will have to say what is good for the individual and what kind of development, what kind of freedom we have to assure to every individual to make individual growth better. And I think we have to point out that economists limit themselves to material growth. And we have parallelly a spiritual growth. And I have no doubt that morally humanity now is far better than it used to be at the time when people were enjoying public executions, tortures, and all kinds of violence that was present in our life even 1 century ago. And today we say it is scandal. We don't want it. So there are some indicators of spiritual growth. If you may overcome your limitations, if the individual may be more generous, more magnanimous, it means it is a sign of spiritual growth. It is easier to talk about spiritual values by negation, because these spiritual values, they consist culture in general, wide sense, not artistic culture, which is only part of it, but general culture. And what is the opposition of culture? It is barbarous, bestial, animalesque, egoistic, selfish, brute, vulgar, villain. I didn't find more English words, but there are probably more. And I think if we talk about social programs, we should think always, do they favor spiritual growth or not? If they don't, then they are not good. We know that democracy constitutes, in our time, not that long time before, but in our time, it is one of these elements that contributes to the growth, both material and spiritual. In material, because the competitiveness is possible only when you have democratic freedom, when you have opposition, when people have right to criticize. And what I like to point out particularly much is such a banal thing like a tender. You have the same word in Russian. If you have fair tenders, you have fair competition. But if you have somebody who makes a call and the tender goes into hands of somebody who steals cement, you have permanent works on the roads and no highway is good. So democracy is a condition of material growth over a certain level. Remember, all these Asian tame tigers were starting with limited democracy or no democracy. Taiwan was under Chiang Kai-shek and a dictatorship. The same you can say about South Korea. But in a certain moment, for the future development, it was impossible to continue this way, and it changed. So let me, from the perspective of neighbor of Poland, express some views, opinions on Russian history. You understand I am a dilettante, and I do it on my own risk, and maybe I'm wrong, but take into consideration. We look on the reference of Peter the Great, and he brought modernization in terms of technology. But he did not modernize Russian mentality. In opposite, he did things that nobody in Western Europe ever did at that time. He cut birds of the boyars. It was enormous invasion of human dignity. And if we ask why, after such a technological jump forward, Russia remained behind the most developed countries, it is assessed that 100 years ago, 1914, Russia was 50 years behind more developed countries. It is probably because some changes in mentality and in social life and in political life were not realized. And it is a question, how far behind high technologies is Russia now? For Western world, the Second World War was a time of total reorientation, and the notion of territory lost its importance and its absolute appeal. All European empires, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, British, in great pains, they got rid of territories that were making them an empire. The most dramatic case was France, with Algiers, that homed more than 3 million people who were deeply rooted in Algiers and said, this is our land. And General de Gaulle tricked them and brought them to the south of France. Now, France is happy not to have Algiers. I think, and that's my personal view, that Russia was lucky when in 1999, Soviet Union was dissolved without a bloodshed. And I beg to differ with your current president, who said it was a bad event. I think it was beneficiary to Russia. And history will tell, and our descendants will know, who is right and who is wrong. But this is my humble opinion of an artist. And my target is, of course, human development in 21st century, how to increase the common good, that more people can be part of higher culture, not only material but spiritual. And all political actions that are constructive to spiritual, or to contribute to the spiritual growth of an individual and of a society, I think they should be supported, and I will welcome them. So let me read it to the end, to the close, another paragraph from the chapter from Gdansk, because I think it was a nice chapter and it was not very widely publicized. Everyone should, my handwriting is not, should contribute, should try to provide as many people as possible with the widest field of individual freedoms and responsibilities. Indifference to any harm which is done in the presence of our mind is remissness which infringes the obligation of solidarity. As human beings, we are obliged to solidarity. And the last, beautiful chapter, scientists, educators, and artists are especially responsible for the presence of truth, goodness, and beauty in public life. And as beauty, I don't mean a kitschy, sweet pop. Beauty is a category that applies to human choices, and magnanimous acts are beautiful, and more people act this way, more beautiful the society is. I to все, что я вам приготовил.
This is indeed what I had in stock for you. I can now pass on to Russian and remind you, and this is something that comes from my personal experience. Do you know how my generation, and I am probably one of the oldest in this hall, what we have lived through, the three words of Aristotle, kindness, truth, and beauty. With the truth, my generation has had great problems for the past 70 plus years, because already in the war times, truth, don't say the truth, don't tell the truth when the German officer knocks at your door. Is there anybody there? You should speak like a boy. And a kind boy would lie, and a good boy would tell the truth. And the bad boy would not tell. And then Immanuel Kant came from your city and spoke about the categorical imperative, that you must not lie. And this is what I heard in school. And when I went to school, my father called me and had a very father and son talk with me. He said to me, the teacher of mathematics, physics and chemistry will tell the truth, and you have to listen, and you have to learn. And what you will be told at the lectures of history, literature, geography, tell us, and remember that they lie. And you come to me, and so we will tell you the truth. On my father's side, my family is Italian, and my forefathers were architects and builders, and I was myself to become an architect. But my father, when he showed me these socialist constructions, for instance, the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw, the great gift of Stalin, he once told me, and even one day a policeman came and started to eavesdrop. He said to me, you have to be a dark man to build such a building. These architects are cretins because they're insensitive. This is not art, this is ideology in architecture. And I understood that I will go for the polytechnical school and then build such houses and then mock myself in the evenings. And I understood that I would not sustain this. And so then I decided to go to the physics department. But sometimes not telling the truth is also a lie, but a necessity. Not because a person was a coward, but because this was indeed for the salvation of the uttermost good. But the problem is that we never know if this good is an illusion or what we should really be standing for. Our contacts with the government were very difficult, but of course it is a major difference that the communist ideology came to Poland on the tanks, and it was always regarded as foreign. And already in the 1980s, in a decent house, people with a party ticket were not received. The more so that our actors were divided, and the party members with non-party members did not want to co-play at the theatres and in the schools. And you know, and if people thought, or the actors thought, that the public likes them, the liking of the public is everything to an actor, just like a politician. And if they feel the government gives them what they want, cars, apartments, houses, but there's no, but they cannot give them the love of the public. And so nobody wanted to get any privileges or material gains from the government. This is, I'm talking about Poland in the 1980s, and then everything collapsed. But maybe we should tell you that in the 1980s, we were getting prepared, even though we did not have much hope, we were getting prepared to sit by the table. There were such seminars, and even then we were thinking about the hypothetical situation when we could influence the government. And some of these laws were even prepared as draft laws even before the fall of communism in Poland. And these laws were enacted, and this was our joy, and this was our happiness, because the democratic politicians, once they came to power, would not have wanted to enact these laws, such as the law on self-government, which is, I think, very successful in Poland, because the government is accountable to the locals. If I have a problem in the village where I live, I don't have to call the ministry. If I call my village elder and tell him that I have a problem on my road, he will tell me that this would be dealt with. This is an achievement. Many things were unsuccessful. They failed. Of course, Poland is far from being a paradise, and we're a divided country, and politically and spiritually speaking, the situation in Poland is very, very worrisome and makes one anxious. But some of the successes includes that what we did in 1989 led a profound change in the government, and the people who had been underground came to the government to replace those civil servants who had lived and worked there for 40 years. And because they were, and they did not have the power and the force to make their cause. And once he or she can prove his or her point. We have some more time, and I will be glad to answer some questions, but of course the artists who are used to press conferences are ready to answer any questions, even about which they have no idea, but the artists should not be trusted too much compared to the academics, so we're quite free in our dialogue. I'm ready to take up your questions. Thank you. In the Bidoskina, we'll start with this discussion. Thank you. Andrei Alexandrovich afforded me the luxury of the first question. Well, first of all, I think that we shall all leave this hall enamored, and we'll wait for the next meeting. Lena, who is here, is getting the highest Polish order, and this will be the second highest Polish order in her life and in our life at the school. You have said very important things about the public good, the values, and we are used to think that we share the European values. And recently we were told that Russia is not Europe, and we were at a loss, because geographically we would probably not argue, maybe we're not quite Europe, but what about values? I know that you've thought about this. What is it? Are there some Russian values, European values, or the values that we're talking about are universalist, and we must never try to differentiate them? Well, I have no any doubt that all values are universal, except that they are expressed differently in different societies. And they may have a different cut-in. When we speak about democracy, it may have a different connotation in Singapore or in Tokyo than in the United States. And the European democracies are also different between each other. And the democracy in Norway is not quite like the democracy in Hungary. So this is quite natural that it is how we use these values. But the ideas themselves are not quite the same. And if Japan had accepted the path of development that led to its prosperity, the Meiji reform of 1860s, and they led to the social and civilization reforms. And so the technologies was put at such a high level, and the social tensions are not particularly strong. So they found a path or an exit for the creative energy. And so every country must find its path, which would not be identical. Even though the Japanese indeed copied so many German laws and the Prussian laws, however, they were stylized or styled in the Japanese way. I myself participated in these discussions, and I remember a talk with one of your MPs that Russia does not need Europe, that a Euro-Asiatic Union will be created. But then I asked myself, what is European unity? What is European Union? That we understand because from the Middle Ages we were dreaming for the Christianitas, whereby all Christian countries would not fight, and that we will in some ways be united by the same ideals. The sinful men continued to kill each other. The Crusaders killed the Byzantine monks, but we kept our ideal, and this today, the European Union is based on these values, which grew out of Judeo-Christianity, went through the Age of Enlightenment, and all human rights, the rights of an individual, were grown and grew out of this one tradition. But if we create a Euro-Asiatic unity with Islamic and Buddhist countries, what would this unity or this universum based on? And I think that it is the memory of the Soviet Union. I was not particularly happy by this answer of the Russian MP. Denis Grekov from the Altai region. Thank you ever so much. We are often here to discuss the same questions, and we derive from political and pragmatic considerations as well as theories. We are very much thankful for introducing the concept of aesthetics into our deliberation. And I found myself thinking that this should be the major category of evaluation. When you spoke with your father about architecture, it seemed to me very familiar, because the true things are always beautiful. It is true. And I would very much want to hear a somewhat more extended theory about the connection between these points. Well, it is hard for me to talk about this, because we are all dominated by the words of Fyodor Dostoevsky, whereby beauty would save the world, but I take the concept of beauty into the field of aesthetics. If we forget about this, then we forget about beauty. But beauty, truth, and kindness and the good are perceived in pretty much in the same way in the Far East or in Europe. And I remember the words of the Polish poet. I'm not sure how well known he is here. Speaking of Herbert, he is dead now, but in the communist years, he was a dissident, of course, and in one of his poems, he wrote a line that was later often quoted by Iosif Brodsky. The question of taste. The communism corrupted us, but the offer was not tasty. The houses were terrible. The food was substandard, and the temptation was not efficient in any way. So it's a matter of taste. But Zhiguli is not a Mercedes. Yes, indeed. You shouldn't sell yourself for a Zhiguli. Mr. Rukavishnikova, our alumnus, is here, and I'm so glad that she's here. But she's a veteran of the school, even though she is, of course, so very young. She's the alumnus of 2007. Thank you for your precious Russian language. Sometimes it is joked that in the place that culture is between sports and news, but there's a grain of truth in this. Could you comment on such concepts of collective memory or historical memory, especially the historical memory and the responsibility for the actions of the state and our responsibility for things done by others or the acts of others. There is a very important point about the upbringing and education. You should always talk to a child and tell him that you must be ashamed of what you've done, but you must not be ashamed of what you have not done. If you have, if you're louche, if you have a big nose, you are not in any way. You are not in any way to blame. We should not say that we are to blame, but we have to make our judgment and tell them that we are to blame. Thomas Mann emigrated when he understood that the majority of Germans are against his ideas, and this was an act of honor. But the Germans did blame, did castigate those who were guilty. Even though some of the, we must take to court, to the court of memory, those who were the perpetrators of the heinous crimes. And unless we make this moral recognition, we will not move forward. As a Pole, I'm very proud of the fact that over the past 25 years, we always thought ourselves to be angels, and the Polish have that, but over the past 25 years, we have indeed come to recognizing among the intelligentsia that we were guilty with respect to the Jews, that we were to blame, that we have recognized the same with respect to the Ukrainians, that we were dishonest, and especially in the 1920s and the 1930s, we repressed them, and then they took their revenge, but they have to repent for their sins, and we have to repent for our sins. We don't have to repent for other sins, but we have to remember our own. Repentance is the word. It is the clue. This is the only way out. We recognize the results of the war, and there is no proportion. We should not be talking there. But we also recognize that we had crimes perpetrated by our own, that we did not enter Germany as angels. But once we recognize this is a matter of confession for a Christian man, and this is a matter of what you have to come to terms with. It is not my personal fault, but if I recognize this guilt, I feel myself to be free.
Nina, you are welcome. I was waiting for you to tell us something. Thanks, Nina Kolegova from Komi. Mr. Zanussi, I thank you very much for the chance to talk to you. I thank you again, because quite recently you visited us. It was in this spring and March. There were 2 wonderful days. Getting back to the topic of common welfare, what is your attitude towards pitching, which is organized by the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, and when movies are selected on the basis of the historic truth? For instance, Mindadze film was not supported. Initially, script by Todorovsky, Meeting at Elba, was not supported. How can you comment on this methodology, and is there anything like that in Poland? I would want to say that there is nothing of the kind, but it happens. I once was the victim of the same thing. My enemies were feminists. They blocked one of my scripts because they said that my heroine was to be positive because they loved such faces. I was fighting for a year
and then I received the public funds. I'm not a victim, as a matter of fact. But it's public money. How to distribute this money, it's very difficult. I know in different systems, we were looking for the system to be introduced in Poland, not to be political. And I think we found this kind of system. The money which we get for filmmaking, it's not our parliaments provide us with this money. It goes automatically, and that's good. So a certain sovereignty is there, but of course it may be done better. And I understand your question only too well. As a foreigner, I am not to interfere with such issues, but if the Russian culture suffers and films with their propaganda nature again, then you will lose time, you will lose money, and you will be ashamed because the solutions were wrong. I would like to give for to Stanislav Karyakin, who is another of our graduates. We are very pleased that people who actually said goodbye to our school still continue to come here. And this relates to all of you, by the way. You at this seminar are to become graduates, but the doors will be open for you. Thank you for the chance to ask a question. Krzysztof, listening to you, what you said about values, responsibilities, people who worked underground and prepared certain drafts, I recall my reminiscences about values of what came to you easily or what came to you in struggle. In the past, to become a subject in a tribe, there was an initiation. Someone had to go to the forest. There were some magic things to be taken. Now you move from one state to another. When you grow up, you become a citizen, and you just get a passport. There is no initiation. Probably that's why the civil values are not taken quite seriously. This is my hypothesis. And you talked about people who prepared drafts and underground. They were very responsible for their freedoms, for their possibilities. And bureaucrats were removed gradually. How critical is the absence of this kind of tests when you move, when you get civil rights of a citizen? How strongly it influences our society? I mean, the absence of such tests. For a citizen, or whether such tests will develop his civil responsibility. Well, it's hard for me to forecast. I see that all values which were people striving for in struggle, for which they suffered, and then they experienced them profoundly. But if it is a gift, if your freedom is a gift, people don't value it. Presently in America, there are quite exotic voices, but these people say, how come that people vote without knowing the programs of the party, or any party? There should be a test before you enter the election poll, election commission. You should show in your test that you know what you vote for. If you don't know, go and learn. It was not yet done, but this idea is in the air. There is a danger that people in free countries vote